Good evening, everyone, and good to have you all here for this important discussion. As Gopal said, this is the 104th event at CIC, and it's a very important discussion that we're going to have today. Let me invite Mr. Gopal Srinivasan, Chairman of Chennai International Center, to welcome the speakers and begin the session, please.
Hi, a very warm welcome to all our attendees and a very special warm welcome to our panelists. Today's subject, which is very neutrally titled Digital Content, Rights and Regulations, is actually a burning subject, right? Many of us feel that the most precious cargo that the nation carries is the freedom of speech. And as freedom of speech has moved from television to online media, the definitions of what is media itself has been redefined and is continuously being redefined because there is no definition at all, because everybody has a different definition. So there is a constant perception right now that either people are generating news that is not news, or people are actually being prevented from expressing their views freely. And hence the new digital content rights and regulations of the government is a great segue for us to discuss this subject. With us today, we have Ankit. Ankit Sani is an award-winning intellectual property and TMT lawyer. He's served as an expert on many forums, and importantly, he has the privilege of submitting his views to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology while looking at the cinematograph amendment bill. So Ankit, welcome, and we look forward to your inputs on this subject. Next to him, I'm just going by the order on my screen, pardon me, is of course R. Jagannathan, Jaggi, as we all know and love him, the editorial director of Swarajya as of this moment. But Jaggi has been known to us, among other things, as the editor-in-chief of all the Network 18 publications. And for people like me who are a little older, we remember him from many other important publications. So Jaggi, welcome.
Thank you.
And I think he will bring his perspectives as, I think, seen as a person who, shall we say, is a centrist to some and maybe a little bit right of center to others. He'll bring, but more importantly, his views, a very seasoned journalist, a highly respected journalist in the country. Welcome, Jaggi. Then I have with us Mr. K.R. Srinivas. K.R. Srinivas, again, another very eminent editor. He set up a editor research function at the Daily Tanvi Group, and he was a resident editor of the Times of India, Hyderabad. He has had many successful marquee stories, including his story on C.K. Jafar Sharif and so on, which I think many I have read for sure. So I'd love to hear his thoughts. He always brings a different thought to the audience. Then we have with us Nikhil Pava. Nikhil Pava is absolutely one of those very activist campaigners. He's very famous for a Save the Internet campaign, which all of us are very famous for net neutrality in India. He also co-founded the Internet Freedom Foundation. So he comes right to us from the very strong, shall we say, the center of the entire digital media movement. He's also deposed before India's Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology. So welcome to Nikhil, and he actually called me a fascist on Twitter, and I said, why did you come and speak at CIC? So that's kind of how CIC works. We welcome all ideas. We don't take anything personally. So lovely to have you. And to moderate this very important session, we have none other than the redoubtable Girish Srivastav. So Girish is known for many things, but in the context in which he connected, and I would thank Sharad Sharma for making this connection to us. Girish has been the Secretary General of the Indian Broadcasting Foundation, and he actually, in that role, spearheaded an important function, which was self-regulation of content in the non-news space, which I think is kind of where this conversation is also going, because as responsible citizens, we all want to self-regulate what we say, which is the right thing to do. So I'll hand it over to the very safe hands of Girish to take over the panel. Girish, over to you.
Thanks, Gopal. Distinguished panel and dear friends participating in this discussion from various locations, I welcome all of you. On behalf of CIC, I welcome all of you. So as you are aware of, this webinar is focused on the recent government's move to introduce greater oversight for social media, digital media, and OTT platforms through new IT rules This is the basic fundamental thing that government has announced. Now, let me quickly read out 10-point rules that government has announced. This will be for benefit of all of us and viewers also participating. I'll be very, very quick. Just one-liner, 10 points I'll read out. One is the social media giants will be required to appoint India-based compliance officers. This is the first thing that government has said. Second, that they have said, social media sites have to disclose first originator of any mischievous message. This is for the social media. Third thing that they have said, the oversight mechanism will include a committee with representatives, Ministry of Defense, External Affairs, Home, Information Broadcasting, Law, IT, Women and Child Development. These are the ministries that he has covered. And then they are saying it will have suo motu powers to call hearings on complaints of violation of the Code of Ethics if it wants. This is what they have said. Now, the fourth quick point is the government will designate an officer of the rank of a joint secretary or above as the authorized officer who can direct blocking of content. Now, the fifth point that they are saying is self-classification for streaming services on content that is for 13 plus, 16 plus, or adults on the basis of age, sex, violence, nudity, and then a mechanism for ensuring children do not access content not approved for them. So this is something which they are saying. Now, the sixth point that they are saying is digital news media will follow rules under the Press Council of India. This is what they are saying, and you'll have to create a fresh website to register with INB for this. That also they are saying. Seventh point is the rules bar social media content that is defamatory, obscene, libelous, racist, harmful to minors, threatens the unity, integrity, defense, security of India, and its ties with other countries. That also they are saying. Social media sites have to remove or disable offensive or illegal content within 36 hours of being notified or of a court order. And now the eighth point is companies have to appoint a grievance officer. This we will discuss. Grievance officer to receive, acknowledge and resolve complaints within a month. Tech giants will also have to appoint grievance officers. Everybody has to appoint. The ninth is an intermediary has to, within 24 hours of a complaint, remove or disable access to content that is illegal or offensive. And the last point is a three-tier mechanism to enforce the code of ethics. That is, one is self-regulation at your level, then self-regulation by self-regulating bodies like BCCC and BSA and others. And the last top layer is government's oversight mechanism. So this is the three-tier mechanism that we have understood. Now, dear participants, during the discussion, we aim to explore how the new rules impact us. This is the overall background of the discussion. Now, let me first begin with, I wanted to begin with this with a very fundamental question. As I already said, again, I remind you that I'll ask questions sequentially and everyone can spend 2-3 minutes either through interjection. Now, this question is to Mr. Sahni, Ankit Sahni. Ankit Sahni, you are there?
Yes.
Okay. This question is to you, Ankit. See, as you know, I mean, all of us, the way all of us understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, all of us understand the three-tier framework created for regulation of online content effectively ensures that the government has both the right to complain and the authority to enforce. It looks like post announcement of these rules. To us, it's looked at. If it is so, don't you think such a move goes against the separation of powers of executive and judiciary, Ankit?
So, Mr. Srivastava, thank you so much for this question. In fact, a very appropriate question to start the innings, if I may put it that way. Before I go on to share what my personal views are on this issue, let's take a step backwards and see how exactly does the executive work. Now, the executive in this case is, of course, the government of India, the central government that we're talking about. Now, the executive by itself cannot issue arbitrarily any directions, any circulars, take out any notifications and do whatever they wish. Now, any such actions or adjudication that they do is derived from a certain statute. Now, that statute obviously is enacted by the legislature, which in turn delegates certain powers to the executive. Now, when we are examining a question of this kind, the two things that I believe we need to examine are that, number one, the rules which are made. So every set of rules, as is the case with the 2021 intermediaries rules that we're talking about, they have been made giving reference to two provisions, Section 87 of the IT Act and subsection 2, Clause Z and Clause ZG, which refer to Section 69A and Section 79 of the IT Act respectively. So in 79 and in 69A, in their respective contexts, there is a window that the Parliament, being the legislative body in this case, has opened for the central government to make rules. Now, the two things that we need to see are fundamentally that these rules should not be ultra vires of the parent statute, which is the IT Act and the provision. And there should not be excessive delegation of legislative powers. So, to bring things into context, this doctrine was examined very recently. Of course, this has been examined several times. We have a very rich constitutional jurisprudential history. But most recent example that comes to the top of my head is the Roger Matthews versus South India Bank matter of 2019. Which came before the Supreme Court eventually, which concerned the finance bill that talked about the qualification of certain members of tribunals and service rules, etc., things like that, which was challenged. And one of the things which was examined was this precise issue. And what the Supreme Court laid down in that, and this is particularly important to answer this question that you've put before the panel, is that now the two tests are again, A, the rules should not be ultra vires of the parent statute, B, there should not be excessive delegation of essential legislative function. The test to determine whether there is excessive delegation is whether something that the legislature is essentially supposed to do and being burdened by a lot of other responsibilities, can it perform certain tasks, or can it take upon itself to perform every task or majority of tasks that are provided for as far as the governance or administration or enforcement of certain law is concerned. That's one question, essential delegation of legislative function. The second principle being whether there are sufficient policy and guidelines which are contained in that provision itself by the legislature, which allows for the delegatee, in this case being the central government, to know what are the boundaries within which it has to act. So there has to be guidance from the legislature concerning the boundaries of where and within which it has to act. So in that context, I believe we have to examine this provision. Now, when we read Section 69A, for instance, and this is the part that troubles a lot of people, and there's a lot of commentary out there regarding blocking of content and how that becomes a challenge as to fundamental freedoms contained in Article 19, especially that of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Now, 69, if you read, I will just read the relevant part in the interest of time. It says, wherever it is necessary or expedient so to do, this is the government, it may, in the interest of the sovereignty and the integrity of India, the defense of India, the security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states or public order, or for preventing incitement to the commission of any cognizable offense relating to the above. So in my view, when I read it, this is the legislative or the policy guideline that the parliament has put in place. These are the factors that the authority needs to determine. Now comes the second part of whether the government can perform adjudicatory functions or not. Now this as a concept is not alien. If you see, there are so many examples in front of us. Let's take the example of labor laws. The first instance of complaint doesn't lie before the labor tribunal, which incidentally is vested in ADJ, civil judge, but it lies before the labor commissioner, which is nothing but an employee of the government of India, is considered an executive. There is the issue of Competition Commission of India. They also have adjudicatory powers. There is the issue of the Controller General of Patents, Trademarks and Designs. So all of these authorities have these powers. And interestingly, this very question came up for consideration before the Delhi High Court in another matter, recent matter called Shamsher Singh versus the Competition Commission of India, where what the Delhi High Court has said is merely because a particular body, an executive body that performs a mixture of administrative, quasi-judicial and adjudicatory functions, merely because it performs a mixture of such functions, that itself is not ground enough to render it unconstitutional. So I think to that extent, my personal view is that it would not fall foul of the doctrine of separation of powers. The fundamental right to challenge this in case a citizen of India or anybody else is aggrieved against what gets adjudicated by the level 3 of the self-regulation mechanism which is provided. There is always a writ jurisdiction through which you can approach a High Court, you can approach a Supreme Court. There is special leave that exists, so there is a remedy for you to challenge. And with that, I think I'll take a pause because these are broadly what my views are. And I will be very happy to hear other views from the panel.
Yes. So Nikhil, you wanted to say. Nikhil.
Girish, I think these rules are they've not been made in a sudden manner. They've been in discussion for a few years now, and in the consultation that took place a couple of years ago, there were about 600 pages of comments submitted, and several people pointed out that what the government was trying to do with the rules, and at that point in time, this 3-tier structure and the self-regulatory mechanism was not a part of the mix. The IT Act, the government is trying to do what the IT Act did not allow it to do. And despite that, knowing that the IT Act doesn't allow the government to create a 3-tier structure or even impose Section 69, which is a secret blocking order on news online, the government has gone ahead and done it. This is, in a sense, bad faith regulation, and I hope that the Committee on Subordinate Legislation will take a look at this and reject these rules, because effectively the government has sought to bypass Parliament. Now, there are challenges that have been made to these rules in courts, but the government can very easily go and do what it did in Aadhaar, which is, even though there was no legislative structure for Aadhaar, it went ahead while the court case was in progress. It went ahead and passed a law. And given that they control both they have both the dominant party currently has both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, they can very quickly draft a law and pass it, or amend the IT Act without proper consultation to enforce these rules. These rules today should not exist in this manner. They were opposed then, and I think it's important for freedom of speech to oppose them now, given that they're doing what Parliament hasn't allowed them to do here.
Mr. Jagannathan, your views on this?
Basically, I think that these things should be done through a legislation and a proper consultation, and not through rules framed under the IT Act. However, in terms of intent and actual reality, that's where the problem is. Don't forget that all the restrictions that come on free speech come directly from Article 19(2), introduced almost immediately as soon as we adopted the Constitution. So the same wording is being used even in the current set of rules. If you see, friendly relations with states and all kinds of rubbish have been said in this. Point is, it means if I say that this government thinks that friendly relations with Bangladesh is important. And if I say, look, Bangladesh is sending terrorists here, then I can be blocked. So basically what I'm saying is the restrictions imposed by 19.2 are very severe nature, from sedition to everything else has been now imposed on everybody. The problem never was the intent. Even earlier at the time of independence, people said that, okay, a new country needed these provisions, but they've continued for 74 years, 73, 74 years. They've been put into every other law. Now they'll come into the rules. The issue is really that when you implement these laws, they are going to have a chilling effect on, especially on small companies, especially when you put a 3-tier structure for regulation, self-regulation, and an oversight committee. I mean, see, the big thing, that change that has happened over the last 15 years of the internet is that mainstream media, which was largely controlled by the government and was in bed with all the powers that be, has been challenged by new voices from the internet. Okay, these internet startups are all small companies who, if you want to say, I'm going to create some oversight company, redressal mechanism and all that, then basically I will be doing only that, watching my own back every second day. And it is going to have a chilling effect. In fact, this rules suit mainstream media. They do not suit the challenger media, which has a chilling effect, really. We have seen an expansion of voice from a lot of areas. Now the thing is, it will again constrict the rules to only the rich guys who can afford to have some whole panoply of officials doing this and that and dealing with the bureaucrats. So I think this structure does not help free speech. The intent seems okay, because after all, there are a lot of fake news, there is a lot of child porn, all those things is fine. I understand that. But the way the state is going to implement it is going to be a disaster. And we have seen that repeatedly. People calling somebody as baby penguin or something like that, get arrested and get put for three weeks in jail. And by the time the legal machinery gets kicking, you've already wasted a month trying to, and thousands of rupees trying to get extricate yourself for a minor comment on social media. What I do support is that social media giants should have compliance officers who are based in India, so that they're accountable to Indian law. So far, I mean, you can have social media acting on its own. I mean, I got blocked for something. That's fine. Let's assume that I had done something wrong. But if you can just deplatform an outside Indian law, that is not acceptable.
Okay. Now, I think our views are pretty clear on this question. Now, the next question is related to the social media companies, and I would like to take it with Nikhil Pava. Nikhil, may I ask this question? See, one of the main concerns social media companies have today is to identify the first originator of information, misinformation, disinformation, all the 3 words I'll use. This is the main concern. And in doing so, they feel that it would break the promised end-to-end encryption and thus curtailing the right to privacy. These are the 2 things that they have concerns, and you have covered it as well. I read there.
Yeah.
So your views on, you can elaborate and some light on this. Very widely discussed.
Girish, the right. The argument here is the forcing of changing of a technology platform's architecture, which could fundamentally compromise the privacy of every individual using that platform, a proportionate action in order to determine the originator of that message. Now, while the government seems to assume that adding a minor change in code to add an identifier is going to be able to, and not necessarily having visibility on the message, is going to help them identify the originator of a message. What you need to realize is that in turn compromises the entire platform. It is not possible in an end-to-end encrypted environment, in that technology construct, to actually add an identifier and yet make sure that the conversations remain private in the channel of communication that takes place. So while I understand the government's concern, the problem is you cannot make people more secure by making the platform more vulnerable. The other thing is this construct of this phrase social media. Now, there is one part to social media which is publishing, and another part which is communication. Now, what is being communicated between two individuals is essentially private communication. If that private communication gets risked, then essentially, and by the way, this not just a media is so broad in this construct, and the government has kept it so broad that it also applies to all forms of email. Now, under what circumstances government is going to gain access to this? Under what circumstances? And we've seen, compromises of WhatsApp through the through the PRISM hacking. How is it that they're going to ensure that communications between individuals remain private? And this has implications for safety and security of the country. It has implications for individual privacy, individual safety and security, but also from a democratic perspective. Who's messaging whom? What are they messaging? Is a very integral, is extremely important to keep private over here. For journalists, it means that this could lead to the compromise of their sources. So there are mechanisms of what they're trying to replicate eventually, and this is just a first level change that they're bringing, because we've heard from the government what they really want to do in an encryption policy that was initially introduced in 2015. They want access to all. They want access to all communication when they need it, right? And that's a problematic path to go down, because effectively, like I said, this has an impact on our democracy. I've been in meetings where there are retired army officials who have come and said that, listen, we used to get access to all communications in terrorist areas. And since these platforms have come, since there's private communications, we don't have that access anymore, and that leads to terrorist attacks. Now, that's a legitimate concern. But the point is, you might make these large platforms more vulnerable, but it takes very little for private platforms to be developed that they may not have any access to, that can use similar technology, and you'll have no access at all. So in turn it ends up doing is it makes everyone more vulnerable. It makes everyone less secure. And I think there needs to be better thinking around this change in the process.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to push you further on this. See, the streaming content is not a public content, broadcast or public exhibition. So how do you connect it with the current regulations that have been announced? It's something which I was generally wondering.
So there is no fundamental difference in terms of the construct, not the content, the construct of how we receive streaming services and pornography. These are under the IT Act. There are only two types of entities. One is the intermediaries, which allow the transfer of content from you to me, and the other is just the creator of the content, right? So in the net neutrality battle, I've written an article for the Hindu, which started with this idea of 1 billion television channels, and that's not possible in the current regulatory environment, right? On TV, but the internet allows all of us to express, all of us to create. Now, what we need to remember is what is illegal is already illegal. Child pornography is illegal. In any demeaning of the national emblem of the national flag is already illegal. You don't need a new separate regulatory structure. When I mentioned pornography, because in 2015, Mukul Rohtgi, who was then the Attorney General of India, went and placed the government's position on banning of pornography, saying that what people view in the privacy of their bedrooms is their business. We do not want to go and do model policing and control what they view. And so, why is it that there is a sudden need to control pull content, which I'm choosing to watch, which has sufficient disclosures? I know what I'm watching, and create an entire regulatory structure where the government has the final say on whether it should be censored or not. That doesn't. That basically goes against what the government had said in the Supreme Court, right? This is all pull. This is all private viewing. And they have no grounds for trying to regulate it, especially since the IT Act does not allow it to create an entire regulatory structure for regulating streaming services. Streaming isn't even defined. In fact, I'd like someone to explain to me where in the law the phrase news is defined. So when they talk about news and current affairs regulation, I cover technology policy. We have a publication that focuses on a particular sector and on a specialist sector. Agency Facts or AFACS and Exchange for Media focus on the advertising ecosystem. Are we covered under news and current affairs or not? There is no definition. There is no process that has been followed for creating all of this. There has been no consultation with the public. The regulation of streaming service and the regulation of news has happened without any public consultation. In fact, there has only been private consultation with industry groups. How do you pass such a far-reaching regulation without a legislative process in Parliament? This is a travesty of our democratic processes. This is going against everything that our founding fathers created when they drafted the Constitution, expected the government to do. We cannot allow this to stand.
Sure. So taking a clue, thanks, Nikhil. Now I'll move to Srinivas. I have a question for him on digital news, only related to this only. Srinivas, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, Srinivas. Yeah, Srinivas, this is related to digital news. And as you know, IT Act has been expanded. You know, Nikhil was mentioning in detail about this. IT Act has been expanded to bring digital news media under its regulatory ambit without taking the law through the Parliament. This is a fact. Our friends from digital news, lot of calls I received because I was with Media Federation. So a lot of news channels spoke with me. Our friends from digital news say that we in any case fall under print and television news norms. Then, so why put us under the current regulatory ambit? I say, how do you react on this, Shini, on this question, which is being,
These points when Nikhil was talking about the role of Press Council of India, for example. There's already and all news sites come under the ambit already. So there is no necessity to draw news sites into this kind of a law or ambit of law, because most news platforms have ethics that they follow very strictly. Most journalists, writers are very careful about what they write or what they provide in terms of online content or even video content. So is there a necessity to really further regulate journalists? I don't see that. Because journalists by themselves, I'm sure Jaggi will also agree with me, are always self-regulating. We try to only write the truth and bring out stories of truth. There's no intent really to divert news in any other form. For us, it's very straight. We stick to facts. We write. We may give an interpretation for understanding of the readership. We may give a perspective. We may talk with data. I mean, you may argue that while doing that, some people do slants. Yeah, there may be editorial policies of certain news groups where there may be a pro-government or an anti-government anti-establishment kind of a newspaper. They may slant the stories. There are instances, but generally editorial groups are quite active in containing that kind of writing or that kind of production of the news, and they try to give unbiased version so that the readers or the viewers can have form their opinions in their minds. So and the other point is, as others said, they should have brought it to a legislative process. So how do you contain digital content really? Can you really do that? So many billions of downloads and uploads every second. What will you monitor? What are you going to do? How many people do you need to monitor? Can you really do that? So is it that gives a doubt in the mind that is the intent right? That gives a doubt in the minds of people. As others said, why did they not discuss it in Parliament? There's such an important law.
It is. It is.
More consultative committee should have been formed. More opinions should have been taken. Okay, you may want to say that we need to protect the interests of the journalists, have the interests of the country in mind while doing the in whichever role they are doing. So anyway, we are all from the same country. We have the same views as for the protection of the country. So there may be some serious content. There may be, that's there everywhere. It's there in public life. It's there in personal life. It's there in day-to-day life. There are people who do mischief. There's a way of monitoring them, and there's a way of handling them. But do you need such a law really to monitor all this? These are my thoughts.
Mr. Jagannathan, I would like to hear your views on this. Shidi has elaborated this. And while you give your views, let me in advance ask another related question with this. See, news channels, any digital news, I have seen their balance sheet. Generally, it's very tight. So once you go for compliance of, say, for example, you are appointing grievance redressal officer, you have to invest in IT for filtering things, and whole compliance will come as a cost. So how do you see that? I think it would be a sizable portion of the cost that you bear in running a news platform. I wonder a lot of them might go away just. So your take on this, what Shidi elaborated on digital news, Mr. Jagannath.
As I said earlier, this kind of regulation only works if you are a very large media house with scores of crores of cash flows and revenues and top line. The minute you become a 1 or 2 crore website, or some even 5 or 10 crores, suddenly the costs of these kind of compliance burdens rise exponentially. And not only that, the problem is not just the cost of the compliance. The point is, if anybody wants to take you down, all you need to do, just like a service denial attack on the internet, you can actually get 500 guys, motivated people to send grievances saying, oh, I don't like this website or this content in the website. And before you know, the compliance officer will fail in his job because he can't handle 100, 500 things. He might just feel that, oh, let me take it down, otherwise I've had a problem. So basically, it's have a very chilling effect on free speech, because don't forget, the threats to freedom are not only from the government. Threats to freedom come from 2 other sources. One is big tech, which deplatformed a US sitting president without any thinking twice. Let's assume he's a terrible character, but you had no business doing this. Third thing is, groups acting in concert can actually make it impossible for small digital content producers to function if this kind of regulation comes in. So basically, it's I'm saying it's more a pro big media regulation rather than the millions of voices that have come over the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, that's where my worry was, because creativity flourishes. I mean, whatever exercise I have done in innovation, when you are in distress, you produce best out of your mind. And a lot of small players in digital space, they have come, they're innovating with content. I was worried about them, that, how will they comply and where will they go? So your point is very well right. And I'll talk to you. Nikhil, you want to make a quick point, because next question straight. I wanted to go to Dr. Jagannathan and speak with him something.
I just had a couple of things to add to what Mr. Srinivas and Jagdeep said. Just let's remember that traditional media doesn't have a 3-tier regulatory structure for it. Whereas for digital media, for digital news, they've got a 3-tier regulatory structure. Secondly, while in case of OTT regulation and in case of social media, there is a clear differential in terms of size and scale. The news space has no differential. So a Faye D'Souza running a YouTube channel and getting or Akash Banerjee running a YouTube channel and getting money through Patreon and viewer donations will have to also comply to the same norms of having a internal committee. I mean, some of these people don't even have enough employees to have a committee. So exactly same norms. We need to reduce the regulation on news so to enable free speech and not increase it. All of these, what is illegal is already illegal, right? And but the most important thing that's happened over here, and that we should not forget, is the implementation of Section 69 of the IT Act and enabling that for news publishers. It means the government can issue a secret order to a news publication to take down an article. And under law, that publication cannot disclose that article has been taken down. So there is secretive government censorship that's going to take place on the digital news sites.
Yes.
And I'm not saying for this government, I'm saying any other government in the future. These are bad norms to put into place. Right, and all of these policies have been brought in without any consultation with digital news players. Mr. Javadekar kept saying he doesn't know who they are. But the point is that they brought in FDI for online news. They brought in an implementation guidelines for FDI and online news and asked for registration. And then they brought in the amendments to the IT Act. None of them have interacted with any digital news publishers. But I don't know. I think they haven't interacted with Jaggi. They haven't interacted with us here. Many publishers don't even, they have no idea how this came up.
Yeah.
And the only people who've asked for this and who have welcomed these moves are the traditional publishers, digital arms, the DNPA, that have asked for more regulations now, but asked for exemptions for themselves, not for the media fraternity as a whole, not for digital news as a whole, but saying exempt us and not the others. I mean, how ridiculous is it?
I don't know. I'm sure government will take care of that. Now, my next question is, thanks, Nikhil. My next question to Mr. Jagannathan. See, based on available facts, Mr. Jagannathan, based on available facts, Germany, Australia, Singapore, Russia, all of them have enacted similar regulations in their respective country with some degree of success. I'm not saying they're all very successful, but it is there. So, assuming government decides to go with this current announcement rules, and as a part of the system, we'll have to live with it. So, don't you think it would be fair to give some time to the government to achieve right balance between surveillance and oversight instead of straight away reacting?
Yeah, unlike some others, I'm not necessarily saying that the government had bad intentions doing that. Because there has been a cacophony of voices from all around saying that, oh, fake news is doing this, that is happening, hate speeches are going around and things like that. So, given that cacophony and some of it has already been heard in the judiciary, the government probably took the opportunity to do this. But the problem, regardless, even if such laws exist in, say, Germany or France and all, I think we have to make allowances for the capacity of the state. The Indian state is not a capable state. It is a real mess where I think an order given from the top, by the time it reaches the bottom, it becomes completely different. Only a strong state can act with restraint. A weak state, which has many layers of information going through, will end up with a mess and actually become a tyranny. So, till you have an effective state, and which India does not have at this point, having strong laws percolate through a weak state actually will end up with a lot of injustice to lots of people, and local tyrants at various levels will actually carry the day. And also, let me point out, what to take down a content cannot be done at the joint secretary level. It has to be done outside the level of government. I mean, can you have, for example, a competent Supreme Court judge and a panel of 2 or 3 people whom decisions on taking down content are passed? But joint secretary is part of the power structure. So if he is will he listen to his boss, or will he listen to the voice of free speech and reason? So he is not going to, he is going to tilt on the side of excess. So I think the taking down mechanism needs to be outside government through a widely accepted person or a respected guy whose belief in freedom is well acknowledged.
I think this is a great mechanism you are suggesting, and the reason I was asking, because this announcement has come and country is completely divided in opinion in accepting it, every bit of it, all the 10 points are being debated. So government is also receiving it. So I'm sure in the best interest of our news media content online, I think they might review and they may come with a revised version, or God knows which version. So I was going to say that if we give them some time to study and maybe definitely come out with a revised framework, because reactions have been completely different. It is not like 100% country has accepted.
Sorry, I want to add what Jaggi said on this point, if you don't mind. The editors themselves are competent to put the right content into any of the websites. One.
Yes,
By-
yes.
Secondly, you can, if at all you want to bring down some content, the Press Council of India is also a solid body, and with very seasoned editors who will be heading it. They can also direct if really a content is of that nature. So I don't see a problem with that. I just want to add to what Jaggi said.
That's correct. So now I have friends. In the interest of time, I think this session will get over by 6 positively. So 2 minutes we have taken Q&A participants' time. But I definitely want to ask you one question. This I have purposely written, and anyone from the panel can answer. And if everybody gives his views, nothing like it, but very briefly. I am saying recently in one of the judgments, Supreme Court has mentioned about the need for pre-screening. This is a very recent judgment. They were talking on the Tandau case they were reviewing. The need for pre-screening of online content. Assuming government decides to, I'm asking, assuming government decides to make pre-screening mandatory, what would be the best possible and practically feasible mechanism for implementing the same, if at all? Because I'm asking you, I have been on our policy corridor shaping policy for various sectors, starting from IT, energy, telecom, media. I was with you, all of you. See, these things, when it is spoken, it goes a long way. And, you have to make a course correction, or if you want to live with it, suggest a good mechanism in advance. Otherwise, the disaster will happen. So, and I have a feeling that with this statement, government might consider censorship, which may not be a good idea. I personally feel that. So I want your views. Maybe I start with Nikhil and everyone can join.
Nikhil,
you're not audible, Nikhil.
Nikhil,
you're not audible.
The last time I remember someone talking about pre-screening of content, it was in 2013 when Kapil Sibal tried that, and there was a huge outrage regarding that. This is, yes. I believe this should be no different. Pre-screening is an undemocratic exercise. What is illegal, and it should be, and people should be prosecuted for publishing content that is illegal. Pre-screening, to my mind, should not exist. Let's not forget also capacity. The censor board today struggles to deal with the 20,000 Indian movies. Imagine having to deal with every movie produced everywhere else in the world. What will that lead to? It will restrict consumer choice. We will not get access to content because there aren't enough people that the censor board can hire to be able to watch every movie and pass judgment on whether it should be allowed in the country or not. I don't think it is the business of the government to try and prevent us from viewing what we want to view privately. And I think any such move, and I would strongly disagree with the Supreme Court in this view, it should not be implemented. Right? I just wanted to address the previous point that you mentioned about Germany's NetzDG. That has a limit of 5 million users for an entity to be classified as social media. India's adopted the same limit. Now, Germany has a few million users. 5 million is very large for them. In our country, there are 538 million WhatsApp users. And the number of platforms that will easily reach to 5 million is so small. So you want everyone to conform to these onerous guidelines and pay for the compliance hassles and risk going to court when they don't have the capacity. Coup has just launched. Coup will not survive these rules. And what will the platforms do? The platforms will over-regulate our speech. You might talk about deplatforming of Trump. It's a private platform, I agree, but it's a private platform performing a public function. We need to have a more deeper conversation about whether we respect the rights of private platforms or not to regulate our speech. I mean, we have the ability to launch our own platforms, frankly, and nothing in the internet prevents us from doing this. But to basically put these kind of regulations that they've done in terms of user complaints and the criminal liability of the chief compliance officer, the platform will start censoring everything they can to prevent liability wherever a user complains. And we've seen this in 2012. Rishabh Dara did a fantastic research report on this. You'll start complaining about over censorship from platforms. So you lose either way. We need to have a better conversation, a smarter conversation, and rules just being pushed out without taking into account the comments that they received 2 years ago. The rules that have been brought out are almost similar to what they had tried to publish then. We can't do policy making like this. It is just terrible form for policy making to do it without proper consultation.
Mr. Jagannathan, your quick view on this.
Yeah.
Pre-screening thing.
Basically, just to add a little caveat to what Nikhil said. Basically, Germany's 5 million is adjusted for population, 80 million for us. But 80 million is a very large number even in India. If you take the states separately and not India as a whole, because communication happens in multiple languages. So if you put 80 million as a threshold, you will actually end up having to censor nothing at all or whatever it is. So I think 5 million is not an unreasonable thing in each language if you put it. If it is in some languages that are spoken more, you can have different thresholds. But more than that, what I feel is India cannot afford to do so much peace screening as everybody has said. You cannot have millions of things. You can't have a film censor board in this thing. I think it is better to have, only if you create a Chinese kind of surveillance capacity where you use artificial intelligence and the conversations of every citizen are essentially monitored through thousands of people who are monitoring all these things. You cannot do any policing. So discretion is the better part of it. What you do is take the exceptional case and make an example of it. If somebody has really violated some very serious norms that nobody in society will accept, then make an example of him and if not string him from the lamppost, at least make sure that he goes to jail. That should be the norm so that people get the message. Instead of trying to say, okay, I will check everything, filter everything, that's impossible.
1 minute each for other two panelists to react on this. So I'll begin with Ankit Sahni and then with Srini. And then please stay with us. And we have a couple of questions. I can see on my screen, a lot of questions are coming. So I'll pick 2, 3 and close the session. So Ankit, your very, very quick reaction on this, where Supreme Court is proceeding.
I think on this count, my views echo with Nikhil's. I think it's going to be detrimental to the essential fabric of democracy. To have a private body pre-screen content, that is something that I would also personally not be in agreement with, especially because adjudication again should be, at least on this count, as far as offences are concerned, like Nikhil pointed out, all the offences are already in place for each of these objections or objectionable content. Therefore, this should be done by a court and not by a private body or individual, because then there's always chance of abuse and restriction of fundamental rights by one private body against another, which is worse than a state doing it, worse than the court doing it. So those are my views as far as this issue goes.
Srini? Yeah. Srini, your take on this?
I completely agree with what Nikhil and Jaggi said on both sides. Because, pre-screening should be a no-no. Because you cannot dictate what somebody should watch or see or read. It's individual choices and individual interests. The one that is actually more worrying for me would be, when you are on a phone conversation and then you start getting after a few days some promos through Facebook or through Google or something, because it heard your conversation, and then it starts sending problems. That is more worrying for me. But this, I think, is a no-no. Pre-screening should be a no-no. Yeah.
I agree with you. So, friends, now let me start the Q&A session. And I think I am left with hardly 5 minutes. So, first question, this came over email to CIC, and I have received it from them. The Daya Sindhu is writing, is India ready for algorithmic filtering to regulate digital content? She is saying that because millions of contents will flow. What would be the positives and challenges for 1, Indian media, and B, Indian audience in algorithmic filtering of digital content? May I give these questions to Nikhil because he completely comes from this area.
So the view is, and this is a fairly widely accepted view, the world isn't ready for algorithmic filtering, leave alone India. What is happening is that algorithms are flagging content as potentially being problematic, and then you have humans on the other side trying to understand whether it violates norms or not. In all algorithms, it's a program. How you define that algorithm, how you teach it to deal with content is how it acts. So the bias in the data set that is used to train the algorithm leads to the bias in the censorship that happens. And do you really want to leave censorship to the bias of platforms? I think we've seen enough problems come out of that. And in fact, platforms need to be regulated to ensure that algorithms are neutral and not biased in one way or another. So I think I'll give you one small example. On Facebook a couple of years ago, the Norwegian Prime Minister, I think it was, who published that famous photo from the Vietnam War of a young naked girl running and a napalm bomb exploding behind her. Facebook censored that content, one of the most iconic photos in history. Now, should that be allowed or not allowed on the platform? It censored because of the algorithm that pointed it out as child nudity. So look, these are all contextual decisions. They are difficult answers. There is no easy way of dealing with managing content online. I don't think we should rush into, especially using technology, because technology is probably the worst possible way of dealing with the context that humans bring to conversations.
Yes. No, I completely agree with you. And let me go to the second question. This is coming on my screen. I will just read it out. Senthil Kumar, I am strongly for the right to send private and untraceable end-to-end encrypted messages, but as much as I am against it, I feel that it should be technically possible to trace messages without breaking E2E encryption. The cryptographic hash of messaging, text, picture, video can be sent with the message metadata, and when a message needs to be traced back, the first occurrence in message logs will be the originator. It was very long para. Any flaw in this approach? He's suggesting a solution. Ankit, you want to speak something?
Yes, very quickly. Actually, I think because I've had the interesting opportunity to deal with this on the patent front. Now, the challenge is that not every platform works on this methodology. They may have different ways. For instance, I read some days ago that WhatsApp says it'd be very difficult for us because as a mechanism or as an architecture, they don't include, as well as others, Signal, etc. So many of them came out with statements that they don't include in their architecture the function of including metadata. So forcing companies to do this would be unreasonable, I feel, because it will entail a lot of cost, etc., and it would be an undue burden. To put it this way, very briefly.
Okay. I think in the interest of time, there are a lot of questions. I will. Yes. You want to make
just very quickly. It's not just about cost. It's also about the architecture of end-to-end encryption that is accepted globally, which does not involve including a cryptographic hash. In fact, what experts, and we've spoken with technical experts around this, they have said that it's impossible to have end-to-end encryption with the cryptographic hash built in. So it's either encryption with a hash or it's end-to-end encryption. You can't have end-to-end encryption with cryptographic hash.
Okay. So I think, Senthil, you should be, hope you are satisfied with this answer. And there are a lot of questions. I'll suggest participants to write their questions to CIC, and CIC will work with us in giving the answer, within shortest span of time. So that's thing. And before I end the session, my one request to CIC, and hope the entire panel agrees, today's discussion had a lot of excellent ideas about this regulation. So if possibly CIC Secretariat can compile that, and the local media can work with CIC and send a representation to the government, fresh one that we recently had a discussion. And these are all our views on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that would be very useful. I mean, that's the kind of outcome that I would expect from sessions. And this has been brilliant, Nikhil. It was a great learning for me. And thanks, Srini. Thank Ankit, giving your legal views. Jagannathanji, as always, you had been very supportive to us. So thank you very much. And let me end the session here. And thank you for joining CIC, joining this session. And dear participants, I hope to meet you again on some other topic. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And may I now invite CIC ED Vanita to take over the floor, and if she wants to say some final words. Vanita, are you there?
I think before Vanita starts, let me also add my thanks to all of us for this wonderful panel. I think everything from large digital supervisors with machine learning who are going to check everything we do in our personal lives, onwards to whether content should be screened before or after, and onwards to how the tech giants are going to become powerhouses because they become the new censors. In many ways, in many ways, like SEBI's own SROs or self-regulatory organizations, power moving away from the small percent to the giants. So many different threads were covered today, and also the issue of boundaries and borders, and where do things emanate, and whether our messages should be encrypted. It's just fascinating. Thank you so much, and to each and every one of you, Srinivas, Ankit, Jaggi, Nikhil, and a very, very special thanks. I think Girish, you are a absolutely professional broadcast TV class moderator, and I'm so glad you could handle this for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
I have some last minute announcements about the next programs, the upcoming programs. And Mr. Srivatsava, thank you for that suggestion. We have submitted representations earlier to the government from these discussions. We shall ensure that this goes through too. So thank you for that note. Coming up on April 9th is on crime writing. The topic is still getting firmed up. And on April 16th is on nuclear energy, and if it is if it is a solution for sustainable development. Dr. Anil Kakotkar is chairing that program. The email will come to you as and when the programs get firmed up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Srivatsava.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Look forward to meeting some of you offline also, as soon as all this vaccine is all done and dusted. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gopal. Thank you.